their business. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to put up the question, and then I'll put up an answer. And I want you guys to tell me if you think the answer that I put up there is a good answer or a bad answer, okay? And if anybody wants to take on and, kind of make this, be involved in this and give the answer they think they want before I kind of chime in, that's okay too. I want to make this interactive. That's the way we learn here. So, okay, let's start off with the first question, okay? As a buyer, I just want to work with listing agents. Okay, we get that once in a while, right? Especially at open houses and things like that. So here's the answer we have down here. And tell me, do you think this is a good answer or a bad answer? So my job is to represent you as a buyer's agent, is to get you the home at the lowest price possible. The seller's agent's job is to get the seller the highest price possible for his home. So that's an answer. Is that a good answer?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's a pretty good answer. Now, I think you need to kind of extrapolate on that because you want to communicate, but the other thing I like to kind of suggest sometimes is kind of like if you were going to trial, you would not want the other person's attorney representing you, right? You need representation. This oftentimes is the biggest investment you're going to have. You need representation. And so that's a good reason why they should go with you as a different agent, right? And be willing to point that out to them. So now, they might have more questions to that as well you might have to answer, but that's a common question you especially get at open houses, right? I just want to go to the listing agent, okay? And their thought is they're going to save some money and things like that. Okay, first question. Anyone want to answer that kind of differently? Oh, I need the pros there. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just had this happen to me at an open house where this young couple came in, and I was sitting open house with another agent on my team, and they asked him if he was a listing agent. He says, no, but Terry and I work together. So he said, well, I want to talk to, I'd want to write the offer with the listing agent. So I talked to the guy later, and we did we were gonna put an offer together, but it didn't have the right punchline. So nevertheless, I said, I get the feeling like you wanna work with just a listing agent. And he goes, yeah, I was told that, that's really a good thing to do because, you can save some money and this and that. And I said, do you think that the listing agent really is going to, I said, I understand what you're saying, and I understand where you're coming from, and that's a false impression that you have of our jobs. And so I said, do you think the listing agent is going to give you full representation and work on your behalf when they've already signed an agreement with the seller? And he goes, oh, that's a good point. So I kind of elaborated on why he felt it was important to work with a listing agent, because we don't always know what they're thinking.
Yeah, and great answer. And this is the thing. In today's market, although it's shifting, as Stephen Thomas told us yesterday, and it's going to shift even more. It's going to get back at some point to even a buyer's market or a middle market. However, right now, what people are thinking, if there's 10 offers on a home, and my offer goes to the listing agent, I'm going to have an advantage.
Right.
Is that true? Unfortunately, that is oftentimes true. Okay, and that's the reality. Should it be? No. But is it oftentimes? Yes. Okay. There have been agents, we all probably may not know the agent, but suspect that the listing we had, that all of a sudden it sold immediately, and then you look up a couple months later, and sure enough, it was double-ended. They didn't even give the house the time to get other competitive offers to perhaps get a better price. Okay, so unfortunately, sometimes that's true, but we need to speak from what should be to our clients, and that really shouldn't be the case. And as this market shifts, we're not going to be in the market to where most of our offers are going to be multiple. If you were to take, okay, Terry and Pam, through all of our careers and all the years we've had, and some of the other people have been in here for a long time, most of the offers we got accepted on our listings or as buyers was the only offer. We're in this crazy market right now. But most of the time, you're going to have one offer you work with, right? True or not? In this grand scheme of things. Not in the last 2 years, but in the last 40 years. okay? And probably the next 38 years, we may not have another market like this. Who knows? We probably will within that time. Okay, so question 2. Now let's flip this. I like this open house that's your listing, but wouldn't it be better for me to have my agent represent me? So now we're going the other way, okay? The buyer comes into the house. He has an agent kind of. He looks at the house, and then what he does is he says, listen, I like this house, but wouldn't it be better if I looked at this house, or I wrote the offer with my agent? So here's an answer I have here. I was the agent that showed you the home, therefore I am the procuring cause, and you are required to work with me. Good answer?
Dan says yes.
Okay. So just the fact that you walk into an open house doesn't necessarily make you a procuring cause. It might be one point to a procuring cause, but it doesn't make you that. And by the way, if you tell them, that they should be working with you because of that, they don't really care what's best for you. What they care about is what's best for them. That's a terrible answer, by the way. I couldn't really think of a worse answer. That's about as bad an answer as you can get. But here's what you might come up with, and this is kind of becomes the truth. If somebody comes in and they're they want to work with me, and I'm the the seller's agent. We used to call it the listing agent. Now it's the seller's agent. If we're that agent and we want to work with a buyer as well, it might be a situation that you can give a little bit of commission in, and maybe both people gain a little bit out of that. Maybe the seller gets a little bit more for the house, net, and the buyer gets a little bit lower price for the house as well, and you kick in 1% if you double into it. Can that happen? Is that fair to do? Absolutely, you can do that. There's nothing wrong with that. So sometimes that can be good. Here's the thing I always tell a buyer that was going to work with me as well on a listing of mine, is what I tell the seller I think the value of the house is going to be the same thing I'm going to tell them. So where you get yourself in trouble being a dual agent is when you tell one party one thing and the other party something else. But when you have an honest opinion on the value of a property or a range of a value of the property, and you give that to both the seller and the buyer, then you're being consistent. There used to be 12 states that did not allow dual agency. Pam, you know how many there are now? Any idea?
No, but I know that I had a client that wanted to buy something in Oklahoma, and he went into an open house and called me.
Yeah.
And said, what do I do? It's a listing agent. I looked up Oklahoma. It's not only not done, it's considered illegal.
Yeah.
So it's probably up to about 25 now,
Yeah.
because this is becoming a thing.
Yeah, so it probably has gained a little momentum from when I heard years ago. We could probably Google it and find out. Will that ever happen in California? I know that CAR has taken a strong stance against, kind of changing the dual representation laws. It would be really tough, and here's what would happen if they changed that law. Take a company like Regency or a larger company, because the agent isn't the individual agent, it's the company. Therefore, if my buyer wanted to look at Sally's listing, we couldn't do that. We'd have to go somewhere else, which would give an advantage to small brokerages and that have maybe one or two agents, because that way they're not going to run into that, because you couldn't work with the brokerage that had the listing. Whereas there might be an advantage to working with a brokerage that is a large brokerage in the way we have it right now, because they might see or have information about a listing coming up even before it hits the multiple. So again, if you're honest with a potential buyer, you can handle the dual representation, and you can work that so you're not going to be positioned to be really putting yourself, at a lawsuit risk. Okay, it's by telling the seller and the buyer the same thing, staying consistent with it, and trying to put the transaction together. Now, the other thing I like about a dual agent is there's no easier agent to work with than myself. And I think everybody here would agree with that. So it is easier, and you can point that out to a buyer. It makes the process, there's one less, spoon in the soup stirring it, so to speak. So it makes it a little bit easier. That's probably a bad comparison. Anyway, so you can answer that question either way and be honest with it either way. And there's nothing wrong with representing a buyer on your listing as long as you're honest and open. Now, remember, there's certain situations you have that the seller may share things with you that as a fiduciary you can't share with the buyer, or even vice versa, okay? So that you have to be honest with. It's mostly the seller. Let's say they were in a really bad financial situation and they really had to sell the home. You could not tell that to a buyer. I would consider that a fiduciary obligation not to share information like that, okay? Now, if the seller says don't disclose something on the home, that's completely different. But their individual situation, that maybe they had a hardship, you could not disclose that to the buyer. Yeah, Pam?
I'm also seeing an increase in the use of a buyer-broker agreement, so it's always a good idea to ask the person if they're already working with an agent and if they've signed an agreement. Because sometimes they don't know they signed an agreement, but they have, because I had that happen in the middle of a transaction, I had no clue.
Yeah.
And the recourse is not against me, it's against my buyer. And she was gonna go after my buyer unless I gave her some of the commission.
Right.
I think that's called extortion.
It is extortion, yeah, we get that all the time. It's like, we just had that on our team come up with an agent that kind of knew this. They referred the client to somebody else in this area, but they ran into one of our agents at open house and decided they want to work with them, and then called later and said, I want a referral fee, okay? And of course, that's extortion, because no, you didn't refer it. Why would you get a referral fee? So again, that's the case there. So, okay, next question. You said the market indicated that my home was worth $990,000, to $1 million. That is ridiculous. My home is worth closer to $1.1 million. Okay, so here's the answer. We all want to sell our homes for more, but it doesn't do me any good to take an overpriced listing. You don't want to make the mistake of overpricing your home. So is that a good answer?
Nope.
No.
Well, I'm gonna say no, it's not a good answer. And I gotta tell you, first of all, you gotta be careful when this question is asked, okay? If this question is asked at the listing, presentation, and you've not yet got the listing, I have a, kind of a rule. I never disagree with the seller before I have a contract signed, never. Now, I may not agree with them, but I'm not gonna disagree with them. So never ever will I disagree with the seller before I have something signed. And when I do, it's gonna be very softly, okay? Now, a lot of people, there are agents out there that says, I'm not gonna take an overpriced listing. Now, in this market, and for the longest time, there's been no such thing as an overpriced listing.
There's been no issue.
If it was worth $990 today, it'll be worth $1.1 million next month. So all you need is a little bit longer listing. But the situation is right now is we're gonna start to take longer listings. I'm really recommending to the people on my team that you start taking listings for 120 or 180 days right now. And this idea about taking them for 30 or 60 days, that you might be losing listings. So, and again, I don't think that you're gonna wanna put all the energy, time, and money into a listing for only something that you have for 30 or 60 days. In most cases, they would probably extend with you. But again, it's not unreasonable to get a 120-day listing. And a lot of agents just go automatically for 180 days. So, and it depends on how much commitment and money you're gonna put in that listing as well. So, you never disagree, but, and what you wanna do is be kind of soft on that. And here's my position on this. I was never the agent that said that I don't take overpriced listings. It's bad for my reputation. I never said that. What I would say is, I would say something like this. Well, Ruth, the comps kind of indicate, and by the way, I never say this is what I think the house is worth, okay? I always say, this is what the market is telling us, okay? It doesn't come from me, it comes from data, okay? Because I can then separate myself from data pretty easily. But if it's my opinion that I'm the expert, I farm this area, I know what homes are selling for, and it's worth this much, you're putting yourself in a position that you might lose a listing because you think it's worth more. And by the way, you're probably right, but you're gonna be right without a listing. I'd rather be wrong with a listing, okay? So the whole idea with this is stay away with that, talk in ranges, try to give ideas, always talk about the comps are indicating the value would be here, give ranges, be soft with it. I do always like to give my idea of value, at least an idea of value, before they do, because we're the expert. I think they deserve that. However, I'm gonna look at Joseph when I do that, and your wife if she's there, and try to see your body language is when I just gave you that price, was that kind of like, immediate like this, where it's kind of like, oh no, defensive, or kind of like, oh yeah, you open, oh that sounds good. I mean, and we'll do a class on body language if you want. I've done that before. We've taught that a few years ago, so maybe I'll teach that again too. But learning what their body language is, because if they're gonna reject what you're saying in pride, then you also need to kind of backpedal on that a little bit. Here's what I say, let's go on the market, let's try it. And if that doesn't work, we can always make adjustments, because I know one thing, it's better to go on the market and go too high than too low. True or not? True, okay? So that's the way I would go with that. Have I had listings that I had to adjust prices? Absolutely. And especially in the coming markets, you're gonna have to make adjustment. Don't lose listings over dogmatic ideas you have of pricing, in my opinion. You shouldn't do that. And again, I always say that when a seller goes in the market, it's like dog days, okay?
Yeah.
Bless you, by the way. Yes. So the reason I say dog days is because every day is like a week for them. In other words, it goes in the market, as it's sold in a week, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, we've been on the market for a week. A week, that's not even a big deal. I mean, a week go by like that, especially in our future markets to come again, in most markets. So, but to a seller, when they have to get up and get their house ready every day, and lights on, and air on, or the heat on, whatever it is, and get the house all prepared, a week seems like 7 weeks. So I always say, it's dog days. And so believe it or not, they might be very headstrong about getting a certain price, but within a week, 2 weeks, or a month in a longer market, their mind can change completely. And at that point, you've got a signed listing agreement, you have an in-person meeting with them, and you talk about pricing, about perhaps bringing it down. And here's what I always say, here's how my conversation goes. If I'm gonna be talking to Max, and Max is my seller, I'm gonna say, and let's say Max wanted to go on at $1,000,001, and it's not happening, and now we're 30 days later. When I meet with Max, here's what I'm not gonna say, and then here's what I'm gonna say. I'm not gonna say, well, when we went on the market, you wanted to go higher, and obviously it hasn't worked. I'm not gonna say that.
Told you
Okay.
so.
What I'm gonna say is that when we went on the market, okay, we wanted to kind of reach a little bit, okay? And now that we're down here, a month later, it's probably maybe not working as well. So maybe we need to talk about making an adjustment. So anything bad that's going on with you or that home, it's always we. If anything they do, you give them credit for it. That's the way people like working with people like that, okay? So if you put your home in the market, it was your idea to go to $1,000,001, now we need to reduce it. It's not you that did that, we did that. Now we need to make the change, okay? So yeah, Ines?
So what's your opinion, Ed, on when to reduce? Because sometimes I see agents reducing like after 7 days, and that to me just screams sellers anxious versus waiting 14 days, or like you said a minute ago, 30 days, depending on the market.
So in a market like this, 7 days might be right.
Yeah.
The market talks so strongly to you right now. I mean, you go on the market and you might get 20 or 30 showings in a weekend. In a more traditional market, in a week you might get 3 or 4 showings in a traditional market. Did you say that's right, Pam? 3 or 4 maybe? In a traditional market. So you might need a month in a traditional market, where a week might be enough in this kind of crazy nuts market. But then, and it has to do with really kind of how many people go through the home. When a lot of people go through the home and say no, okay, it used to be, this was a stat NAR came out with years ago, that it takes 10 showings to sell 1 home, on average. Okay, which means if 10 people went through your home and no one either bought it or made an offer on it, then the market's probably talking to you a little bit, okay? And that's probably still as good a number as any, I would think. But there might be markets to where it might take you 6 months to get 10 showings, okay?
Sometimes I think it could be a strategy. People feel with a down arrow, they're like, oh, I'm getting a deal. So it could be just another way of making a tickler go out to all those buyers again, depending on how much they change the price, right?
Just remember the down arrow means different things to different people. To some people it looks like, okay, they're in trouble. And to other people it looks like, hey, I'm getting a good deal. They made it, it's like a
Right.
sale. okay? So you don't know how they're gonna look at that. I look at this. Buyers usually buy the home, regardless of days in the market. I'm not a days in the market guy that I used to freak out when my days in the market were a little bit longer. The way I looked at it, if it's the best home in the market at that time, and it's the home they like, they're gonna buy it. Whether it's been in the market for 1 day or 60 days, or maybe in the future, like Steve was talking yesterday, there was a time the average market was 400 days. I can't even imagine some of the people, the new agents right now, to have a listing, the average market time would be 400 days.
I know.
They panic when it doesn't sell in the first week. Oh my gosh, I would be doing triage on the phone, just trying to, get them from, keep them from jumping off the bridge. But it's gonna take longer at some point, and when it does, then we're gonna have to, come back to understanding time. Now, we start getting in a market where prices actually start going down a little bit, that may not happen, okay? If Stephen Thomas is right, our appreciation next year will between this year, from this point, this year, this point next year, between 5 and 10%. My gut is that's a bit optimistic, but he's an economist, I'm not. So let's say he's right, and if he is right, then we're gonna have an active market, no question. But let's say we get in the market and prices start to go down a little bit. What do you need to do? You need to what's known as cut off the market. In other words, if prices are going down, you need to make sure that you jump ahead of the market and get there and get it sold. And by the time it sells, your seller is gonna love you. Just like now, when you told your buyer to go in over ask and you got it, by the time they close, your buyer's gonna thank you for doing that, right? So you talk at different times, different ways to clients. Like in the market we're in right now, and the market have been in for the last year, you tell buyers, bring your checkbook, get ready to write, and don't even think about asking price. In most cases, it's gonna have to go for more. And then when the market changes, and perhaps we're even in a declining market, you talk about, hey, listen, we can get the home for less than asking, sometimes quite a bit less than asking. Sometimes we can be more patient. And I tell my sellers to get aggressive on pricing, and let's get this thing done, okay? Where now I say, let's reach, okay? So adjust with the market. There's an old saying, everybody in my team have heard me say this many times. The whole goal in this business, in the sales business, be first on the mountain and first off the mountain. That means you're the first up and you're the first down, okay? So, okay, here we go. The next one. It's not a big question right now, but it's gonna be the question, and Stephen Thomas talked about our foreclosures are already going up just a little bit, okay? I heard the best buyers are foreclosures, so I'd like to focus on foreclosures. So here's the answer I have. We can look at foreclosures as well as homes that are in the MLS at the same time. It will create more options for you. Is that okay? Good answer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, great answer. The main thing you need to do with foreclosures is explain the process for people that have never bought at a foreclosure, which is almost all your buyers. Very few buyers have ever bought at a foreclosure sale. I've bought 2 homes at foreclosure sales, and I know the process very well. So when you go to a foreclosure sale, here's how it works, okay? Before you go, you must get several cashier's checks of different increments, okay? You put them in your briefcase, and when you go to the courthouse or wherever that sale is gonna be, the first thing that the trustee does is walk around to all the bidders, and he says, show me your checks, I wanna see how much you have, and he writes it down so he knows how high you can bid, okay? That's how they do it. Then they start the bid out at what's known as the opening bid that would have been listed in the trustee sale, and then it's very simple. We start this out at $750. Do I hear 755? Okay, you raise your hand. Do I hear any more?
I always wanted to be in
Anyone
one of
want to
those.
make a verbal number?
It's
You do
somebody
it.
else's money.
Then you go on, and it's just done very casually. The very end, he goes, hey, I've got 805. Anyone gonna go higher than 805? Okay, no?
Right.
It's sold at 805 to Joseph. Okay. Yeah, there you go. You're too late. Then what they do is you get a trustee's deed right then, and they record that within the next couple of days, and it's your house, and then it's up to you to go and find out if there's a tenant in it or whatever. Okay? Now, what you've had to do is you've had to buy this house with cash. How many of your buyers have cash to buy?
A lot
So,
now.
yeah, there are some out there, and you can always, I can tell you that right now is not a time, and it hasn't been for the last couple of years, to buy things at foreclosure sale. It was 4 or 5 years ago, and flip them. We have a friend that did between 50 and 100 homes that they flipped. Ron, good friend of ours, for 7 years. He averaged between 50 and 100 every year. Made a lot of money on it. Very wealthy guy. Okay, and he knew how to do it. He had crews, he had realtors, he had everything all set up. Even though he is a broker, he had other people finding stuff for him, and he was buying stuff all the time, knew what to buy. Rarely bought a home that he'd lose on. Okay, rarely. So he knew how to do that, but your average buyer is not going to be able to buy a foreclosure. Explain the process to them, because they have in their mind that they can do this unless you straighten them out. Doug?
Don't the majority of people think that foreclosures, what they think is a foreclosure,
REO.
is actually an REO?
Yeah. So, and that's another thing I have in my notes here. They may think it's an REO, okay, real estate owned property. That means the bank's already taken it back. And what you can tell them about the REOs is, if that is their confusion, that's going to come on the market through our multiple listing service. So we're going to see that along with everything else. So we're already plugged into that. Don't worry, we're already plugged into that. Okay, so there you go. But pretty common question we get is, can we buy a foreclosure? Okay, next question. Why not submit a lowball offer just to send a message to the seller that I'm a good negotiator? Okay, so
We're not in Vegas, baby.
yes, you're not in Vegas. So my response here is, my reputation is on the line, therefore I recommend that we present an offer that is below asking, but still within the reasonable range. Okay, good answer?
Yeah.
Pretty good answer, pretty good answer, but there's a better approach. So what is the number one thing that our client wants from us?
Option.
Options, options. So rather than going straight to what your recommendation is, give them the options. Here's the options, okay? So I come here and I talk about that if I'm going to give the buyer options on things, I might say this. You know, there's a lot of ways we can approach this, and let me kind of share them with you, and then tell me what you think might, fit you best. Okay, so first of all, we can go in very, very low, and the positive of that is we make sure that we're not going to overpay. The negative might be, especially in this market, is the seller's not even going to respond to us. And if we get them angry, we'll probably never get a response, even if we wrote a higher offer later, that's going to be taken seriously, or they're going to really want to work with. So we do risk losing the house completely, okay? The next thing is, we can certainly go in and make an offer that's crazy high. And the thing about that is, the chance of our getting the home is very, very good, okay? But the negative to it is that we might be overpaying for a house. In fact, we probably will be, okay? So the third way might be is that we go in maybe a little bit lower. I'm talking more in a traditional market than not what we're in right now. But maybe we go in a little bit lower than asking price, but certainly at a point to where we can we have a little chance of getting accepted, but at least we'll get a counter if we don't get it accepted. And that might be the better way to go, okay? So you give the 3 recommendations. The third one is usually the one which I think is the obvious way to go, okay? And they'll usually go with that. Remember, our clients want our opinions, but they don't want them only. They want options with them, okay? I'm the same way. As a buyer, when somebody represents me, I want all the options, then I want to know what you think is best. That's what I
Lost
want.
your connection.
Uh-oh, something went out. There we go, we're back on. So that's why I would say the good thing to do is, we don't want to submit really lowball offers, especially in this market. That would be really bad to do. Okay, next question. The other agent I interviewed believes in print advertising. Do you? So here's the answer, and we'll talk about this later. Print advertising is yesterday's marketing. And in today's market, it's considered ineffective for getting homes sold. Good answer?
Print like a newspaper?
Yeah, like print advertising, like, newspaper or postcards or things like that.
Magazines.
So yeah, so what do you guys think?
I would go about it differently.
Maybe elaborate.
It's a
Okay.
little, okay.
I mean, I think it depends on
The other agent specializes in
the luxury market.
Yeah, well, there you
It
go.
works.
So I would say this, that print advertising for selling homes is mostly not very good. First of all, it takes a long time to get it out there in this market. By the time you get it printed, it's gone. Now, print advertising can be very good for image advertising and getting sellers to go with you, or even getting buyers potentially. But actually getting that home sold, the reason it isn't very popular today, and by the way, you know who does the most print advertising? Luxury homes. go look at the Sunday register, and you're gonna see all these homes in there that they have to pay a lot of money. Angie and I, for many years, over 20 years, we did a full page Saddleback ad every single Friday. It cost us $880. That's a lot of money now. It was really a lot of money back when we were doing it. But print advertising was really important. So print would be newspaper, postcards, things like that. Today, sit down and show your clients how you can micro-target with Facebook advertising and things like that. So you only circle where you want to get it to and people that are looking for homes, and your bang for your buck is 100 times or 1,000 times greater, probably 1,000 times greater. And it's immediate, and just through your own Facebook, even if you're not going to pay for ads and boost them, they're still going to be a good way of advertising. Better than print, in my opinion. Not necessarily for image advertising, but for getting homes sold, okay? So, now you don't have to agree with that, and if you want to keep doing print advertising, you can, but as far as getting homes sold, I think in a lot of cases, other than this luxury market where they kind of expect it, I think for the most part, it's ineffective in comparison to what you can spend for other advertising. So, and the other thing why you would not want to say, the other agent said this, to say it so strongly, is you're kind of throwing dirt on that other agent. And you know, the old saying is you never gain any ground by throwing dirt on somebody else. And so you don't want to throw dirt on them. You kind of say, you know, I don't feel that's as effective. Some agents are still doing that, and they can probably make an argument for it. But I feel like micro-targeting through social media is much more effective, and it has been for me. That way you don't throw the dirt on them, but you can make your point. Okay. Okay, here's the next one. And because a lot of the people on our team are not new now, but they've been new, and we still have a few people that are new right now. This is a good question. I understand you have only been in the business a couple of years. Do you think it is wise for me to select a more experienced agent to help me find my dream home? And then my answer is, I need a sale, give me a chance. So, anyone think that's a good answer?
Tears.
Yeah, start crying, that's good. Yeah, start crying wouldn't work. It's about as good as if you start crying if you're a female and you're trying to get out of a ticket. That doesn't work. So, you know, kind of a bit of humor here, but you make a good point, and here's the thing. You have to be able to defend that you're a new agent. And you need to have that answer ready, and it needs to be loaded and ready to go, because people are going to ask that. And when they ask that question, there are some good answers to it. Anybody here have some good answers for new agents? People in the team, we've talked about this before.
I mean, I know what I use.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I've been working in Orange County for 30 years, and it hasn't been real estate, but I've moved families here for a long time, so it made sense that I was able to come into an industry and help people make that move. And the difference between myself and a seasoned agent is they're gonna just be going through their regular routine that they're gonna do. I'm gonna be pushing to make sure that I get to that other agent and make sure that we make that connection for you.
Great, you've got an answer, and you've done real well with open houses and new clients. Anyone else? Something they want to say? Well, first of all, that is true. But use the power of your company or a team you're on, okay? If you're on a team of 5 agents or 10 agents, and you can say, I'm on a team of 5 other agents, and we have over 200 years experience on our team. And so when you get me, you get the team. And you don't get an agent with 10 or 20 years experience, you get a team with 200 years experience. So if I don't have every answer, I can get the answer. And then let me give you a little, let's talk a little math here. Right now, I'm working with 3 clients, let's say, okay? And I'm willing to work 50, 60, 70 hours a week, as much as it takes. If you have experienced agents that's been in the business a long time, they're probably burnt out if they're still working 60 or 70 hours a week. But they probably have a lot of clients. How much time do you think you're gonna get? How important do you think you're gonna be? That's like a parent with 30 kids as opposed to a parent with an only child or 2 or 3 kids. Who's gonna get more attention? You're gonna get all of me, not this little piece of me, okay? And that can make a big difference. So I come with the experience of my team. I've only been in the business for 6 months, a year, or 2 years, but I've educated myself as much as you can possibly do it in that time. And you get all of me, and I will promise you will not be disappointed, okay? And then you might go into what I still love what Bo says, you know? My goal is to save you money, make your money, and protect you. And I will focus on that on every minute, and my communication will be above and beyond what anybody else can give you. Gotta be able to, I mean, we're in sales, you gotta sell yourself. And if you don't believe you're the best agent for that person, it's gonna come out within your pattern. I mean, you may say the words, but if the confidence isn't it behind it. So the first thing you have to do is you gotta believe it to start with. Because if you can believe it, then you have a better chance to achieve it. So, okay. So let's take the opposite. The next one is, hey, I know you're a very successful agent. How will you have time for me? Okay. You know, and I say, as the saying goes, if you want something done, give it to a busy person. That a good answer?
Yes.
Yeah, it's okay, but isn't it a bit arrogant? I mean, isn't it a bit arrogant? So, who wants to try this? Who's been in the business for a while, wants to try, you know, what you would say, you're an experienced agent, I know you're very successful, how will you have time for me? Go ahead, wanna try it? No?
Sure.
Yeah.
I've got Ashton here, he'll take care of you now. No, I think you'd still talk about the team.
Yeah.
You know, because the team makes, you know, we've got someone that rebounds, we've got someone who hits the shot, and we have someone who plays defense, and we all work together as a team. So
Yeah.
we're all, you know, have a niche to what we're good at, and that's why we work really well as a team, and teams work better than individuals.
Yeah, I love it, and that's the idea. Bring on the team, no matter what, I still think that's good. And then what I would do, and this is when we were doing typically 100 or 100 plus escrows a year, you know, for most of our career. I mean, we had 4 full-time assistants, and they would know that. And we didn't have a team back then. There was no such thing as team. But my team was my assistants. And I would say, I have 4 full-time people that are very capable, that have been with me for many, many years. Everything behind the scenes, they do. You're gonna be stuck with me, and my time is spent just with clients, communicating and being with them. But they're gonna tee everything up for me that I need teed up, and everything I need help with, they're gonna be. The reason I got successful is making a lot of people happy, and I will make you happy as well. So that's the thing that you need to do, is you need to be able to tell them why, whether you're experienced or you're not. Because I can tell you, and one of the things that when you're a successful agent and you're doing a lot of business, you can be busy, but don't look busy. Okay, my football coach used to tell me, he'd say, right, you can be tired, but don't look tired. Well, just as an agent, I'm saying the same thing here. You can be busy, but don't look busy. If you look like you're really busy, your clients are gonna get this feel that everything is like really quick. They're gonna know you're successful if you're successful, because you'll be able to talk and give them stories about clients you have. They'll know homes you've sold. In most cases, you know, they're gonna see what you're doing. So they're gonna know that, but don't act too busy, because they want all of you, not most of you. They want all of you, okay? So, okay, and then I always like to talk about my goal, whether I represent, you know, whether I'm a new agent or experienced agent, is I like to talk about, my goal is to give you the ultimate seller experience or buyer experience. And talk about some of the ways you do that, how it starts. Maybe it starts with a listing presentation. I like to call it a strategy meeting. People don't like to hear presentations. It's kind of like you're gonna talk and there's gonna be a PowerPoint, and they're not gonna like that. So if you're gonna do a buyer presentation or a seller presentation, just talk, you know, bring it back to them, and don't use presentation, use strategy meeting. I'd like to have a buyer strategy meeting, and we'll customize a program just for you, okay? That's the language I like to use. Okay, next question. What improvements should I complete before we go on the market? Okay, and then the answer is we have several options here.
Always a good answer.
Yeah. So here's where you need to probe before you answer this. I can tell you that I know that agents have lost on this. I may have lost a listing somewhere along the line on this too, before I really figured this out. Years ago, I mean, the last time we actively sold was 2015. So it's been quite, you know, quite a few, 2015, 2005.
I was gonna say.
So it's been years ago. But back then, we'd go through and give them a list of things that they should do to help improve their home, and we could help them if we wanted to. Staging wasn't even in anyone's mind, okay? We didn't do staging back then. But now you have a lot of options. You have nothing, which is always an option. You have, give them a list of things they can do. You have light staging, heavy staging, or even renovations, right? So you have all of these. If you go right to where you think what they should be at, you have a very good chance of losing them as client. very good chance, and we've seen people on our team that have lost this way, because they're telling them what they think they need, and in their mind, maybe they're this person. I want to put my home in the market, and I don't want to have to do anything. I'm too busy right now. Okay? So when you start talking about all the staging you're going to do, or maybe renovations or things like that, you lost them. That was the fly in the soup. Conversely, if they really want to maximize the money out of their home, and they're really willing to either do some maybe heavy staging or even maybe some renovations, and they're willing to do that, maybe put 30, 40, 50,000 in to maybe put the 50 in to get 100 out more, then you need to be there for them. And they may want you to control everything and kind of be like the general on it, okay? Or they may just want recommendations. So that's why you have to do probing questions. And you have to let them know there's a range of things you can do, all the way from nothing, all the way to renovations. So what I would probably do is I would say, so Ines, of that range of things I've just talked about, which one seems most exciting to you, just, offhand?
I would prefer not to do anything in my home.
Okay.
There's nothing wrong.
So what I'd say to you is, if you do nothing to it, okay, we know one thing, you're not gonna waste money putting in it that you're not gonna get out of it. At least we can say that. And then maybe you get the listing signed, and then maybe you try to go for some light staging or some cleanup and certain things like that. But get the listing signed before you move into trying to improve it a little bit.
Have you
okay?
seen her house? It's perfect.
Now, your house is perfect, I know, but I have seen it. But let's say, for instance, you want somebody with renovations. So, like Doug, like you say you want renovations. I have to say there's a lot of ways we can do the renovations. Some of my clients just want me to hand out some really good referrals to them and maybe give them some suggestions, but they really want to be in charge. Other clients want me to be the general to it, to make sure that I'm there to do everything, that I coordinate with them, I get everything approved by them, okay? And so this is where listings can be lost, and I think most agents don't understand this because sellers have a variety of thoughts on this, okay? And again, I think people lose sales over this. Ines?
I've done this on occasion. What's your opinion on sharing your past sales with a client of a home that, you know how we show in our consultation before and after staging photos?
Mhm.
Like, this was a client that didn't stage, 30 days later we staged and price went up.
Yeah, so definitely gonna have that in my listing presentation. If during that, in the page before that page, I start talking about, getting the house ready for the market, and I ask that probing question, they say, not interested, gave your answer, don't wanna do anything. That page, next page is flipped over, or that next PowerPoint is just, that slide goes on, okay? So, because that's not what they want, okay? When I go into a house that would be, let's say there's been nothing done to it, and it's not really in good condition. Maybe it's not a mess, maybe it's been gently lived in for 30 years, but they've done nothing. And all the houses around that have been in the market, most of them have done major renovations to sell and get a lot more. When they bring up the fact that they haven't done much, I will usually tell them, you haven't, but you might net more than somebody who's put 100,000 into it and they get 50,000 more.
Yeah.
So although you might sell for less, you might net more, and isn't it really all about how much you net and not how much you sell for?
And that's
So-
such a great way of putting that too.
Yeah, and so you do that, that now sets up, when you give them a price, and I always like to talk about, pricing on a home before my listing presentation, because then if they're alienated a little bit at that pricing, I now have some time to get them back. If the price is the last thing you give them before you finish your presentation, it goes against what's known as sticking the landing. Sticking the landing is a gymnastics term. And what it means is the last thing that you do off that vault, that last thing you want to stick the landing, because it's the last thing in the judge's mind, and although it's only supposed to count a certain amount, because it's the last thing, it counts more, okay? Just like a last round in a fight does, or anything like that. So when you're being judged like that, you don't want to end, you want to end on a high note, and that's your marketing program, not with comps and pricing, in my opinion. That's why I always like pricing earlier on. If I felt like they didn't really love what I said, then I've got some time to kind of reel them back in and create that that, you know, that rapport with them still. So, yeah, I think, oh, Doug, you had your hand up first.
Well, so I was just gonna say, you brought up something in our presentation. So we have an advantage that Aaron does a lot of our staging, at least a lot of the lighter stuff. If we needed heavy staging, we have to bring someone in. But we kind of use that as a value proposition. But I'm kind of thinking that based on what you just said, maybe we ought to pause in the presentation at that point and say, okay, so now we need to ask you a question. From nothing to renovations, and kind of go through that maybe first before we.
Yeah, and I would, the way I would kind of tee the question up is I might say, okay, Doug and Aaron, you know, there's a lot of different areas we can go, all the way from doing nothing all the way to, you know, renovations and everything in
Kick down
between.
the studs.
Yeah, so, yeah. So, and I got my opinion, I want to share them with you, but first of all, what's your ideas on that? Now, my opinions are I'm gonna probably talk a little bit differently based on what you say, because I got a client that doesn't want to do anything, and they've told me that. Now, let's say they don't want to do anything, you go in the market and they're even a little bit high. Maybe at the point you're in the market for 30 days, now you have the ability to do something, not only lower the price, but also maybe, you know, do some staging on it. And usually, if they say nothing, you can still do some light staging along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pam and then Angie.
Okay, good.
In my listing presentation, I do have a page called Preparing Your Home for Sale with generic things to do. And I presented to them and I said, I make it sound like it's an article from another source. So it's not coming from me. And it's got basics about decluttering. It starts the conversation. And it's just standard stuff, you know, litter box, declutter, you know, toilet seats down, just basics.
Yeah, and that's great. You
That's
only get
great.
one chance at a first impression, so let's do what we can. If I had those people that didn't want to do anything, once I get the listing signed, I'm still gonna try to move to getting something done in that house. Last thing I want is somebody who doesn't have a very nice house you put in the market. You're not doing them any favors, okay? And once you got a listing signed, now you can kind of disagree with them a little bit on this and just say, what if I told you that you didn't have to do a whole lot, I could even get some of these things done for you? And maybe it's gonna cost you, I wanna do a little staging, it might cost you a little more commission than what the other agent was gonna charge you. But what if I told you that we can get 4 times back the extra commission you pay? Would that be worth it? And if I was in control of everything, and we get all done within 2 weeks? And then he would say, no, and then you know. But you got the listing signed, you're not gonna alienate him at that point. Angie?
That was exactly what I wanted you to go to, so I should have just kept my hand down,
I-
because you were gonna hit it.
Same thing, same thing.
But
I'm like-
also, that might be when, like, where you skipped over the page with Ines, now you might even pull out some of those photos and say, you know, I wanna revisit this just one more time, just to see, you know, I wanna share with you some case examples and see if you might wanna rethink this, and then what you said was perfect.
It's funny, my last client, they said they didn't wanna do anything, and then I came back and they made this room immaculate. I mean, it had everything was in it. I'm like, wow, I thought you didn't wanna do anything. I told them let's just declutter.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy.
In the end, you're gonna wanna do some stuff, but be soft.
But you do it after you get it signed,
Yeah,
that's
after
the
you
big
get it
point.
signed.
We had an agent on our team years ago that lost a listing for just the opposite. These people, they had a home in Ladera and they wanted to do some renovations, okay? And you know, she kind of suggested all we do is just kind of a little, you know, a few things and things like that, maybe kind of medium staging. And they want to do renovations. They were looking at it and so she lost the listing because the other agent came in and said, yeah, I'll take care of everything and I'll be in control of everything. Now, I don't know if that agent gave them the option or just said, I'll do that, and it matched what they were looking for. But I do know this, you have to be different things to different people. I remember my first broker told me, this wasn't great advice, but he says, talk to your clients how they talk to you. You know, if you have a trucker, you know, talk to them, if they talk to you like a trucker, talk to them like a trucker. Now, I'm not gonna do that, but if I'm working with an engineer, they're gonna get a lot more detail from me than if I'm working with an artist, okay? You know, artist wants to see visions.
They want to feel it.
Yeah, and then I'm gonna work with an engineer, I'm gonna have all kinds of data and all kinds of stuff for him, right? I mean, Stephen Thomas, I love his presentations, okay? I'm a little analytical, but not, I could have used far less graphs, okay? in that presentation. But I love him, I think he's good, but his presentation lost me a little bit with all the graphs. Now, when he had you know, some of the pictures he had on there, and he was talking about 23% and things like this, not with all these bar graphs. I was totally logged in. I mean, connected and so we have to be able to do that. One of the advantages that Angie and I think we always had is when we would go together and do listing presentation, which was most of the time we'd go together. I would do the listing presentation, she'd be the color person, and she would be the reader. She would sit there and read how it was going, so that in the event she could see that I was going off a little bit, or something I said, they might have jumped a little bit and I didn't catch it. She has the way now to kind of smooth it over for me.
Did you wear shin guards?
Well, yeah.
Oh, no, I learned early on. Do
So,
not
no, I
get
mean,
under the
it was-
table.
it was really great. And there was times.
That would be great. That was fantastic.
And there was times that she would see that. And then there's other times that, the kids would be bothering us. She goes, you mind if I just go play with your kids in another room so I could give them a breath? I mean, whatever we needed, she did. And she was such a key part to our listing presentations, because she would sometimes, it was hard to compete with somebody who had, a second person there that could, fill in whatever was needed. So, okay.
Everything and anything.
Yeah.
Okay, this next one came from me doing this a long time ago. It's not as big a deal now. Is it necessary I place a lockbox on my home? And then my answer was, of course not. Many homes in the market do not have a lockbox, and this is seller's choice.
That's a bad answer.
answer.
That's a bad.
Huh?
That's a bad answer.
Yeah.
But it
I
might
mean,
be a good answer at the listing presentation.
Yeah.
okay.
It's a better discussion. If they felt that way and it came up at the listing presentation, we said, okay, that's an option. And you go ahead. You're doing the
No, go
presentation,
ahead.
not I.
No.
Did you say, oh, bless your heart?
No, we'd share the options and give our kind of soft recommendation, but then we just let it lie if they said they didn't want a lockbox. But then when we did the actual listing paperwork, we'd revisit that, and I think every single time we got a lockbox, even on big customs.
Yeah, this would kind of be my answer to start with. No, you don't have to have a lockbox. We get the listing signed, I'm gonna say, one of the things you hired me for is my honesty, right, my expertise. I'd like to share with you the difference of a lockbox and not having a lockbox. Not having a lockbox means that you have agents that will not show your house. I'm just gonna tell you that up front. And the reason that is because all agents out there have called homes before, and they're supposed to show up, there's no lockbox. The seller says they'll be there and they're not there. And they look really foolish to their clients. We've all been there and all done that. And so you may lose showings because you don't have a lockbox. What I do is do everything I can to get showings. And the one thing that we're not gonna do is have a lockbox. It's kind of like we're shooting ourselves in the feet. So then my next question would be, what fears do you have with a lockbox? Okay, and then we go through that. Maybe it's control, or they think their house is gonna be, robbed or something like that. So let me ask you this, is your house more likely to be robbed if you're on the market, or less likely to be robbed?
More.
Less.
Oh.
Because a burglar doesn't want people showing up when they're doing stuff, right? And it's on the market, people can show up at any time.
Right.
Okay? So I never had a house that was burglarized, ever. And I don't think very many people have. And the reason you don't is because burglars want houses that no one's there. Okay? So that's why most burglaries take place in the day. Most burglaries take place where the man is not. So commercial buildings, they happen at night. And houses, they happen during the day. Okay? And with a lockbox, burglars are afraid of people showing up. Okay? Yeah.
And I think in today, because things have changed, obviously, when you get a client, a seller that's concerned over, agents just walking through, and I'm sure we all have those stories where agents have just walked through, and you let them, at least I let them know that I time it from like 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. And that you can add an additional layer of security, if you will, which is the CBS code, which you have to call me, you can't just walk in. And that gives them peace of mind immediately,
If you have
because
someone
we've all
else
had those
really-
sellers that say, I am adamant, I don't want a lockbox, because they think people can just walk in, so.
As a listing agent right now, if my house did not have cameras on it, I would install them for my clients.
Sure.
And I would tell everybody, our son's house went in the market, he bought about 1.5 years ago. He had to sell, and he actually bought and then he sold. And he had a great big sign, I told him to put up before you go in, this house is under surveillance, okay? Big sign before you walk in the front door. And yet, all the buyers went in, he had cameras, I didn't put them up, he had cameras all over the place. He's a techie guy, right? He could look at them anytime. So during the showings of the house, he was able to hear every single buyer and everything they said, okay? They ended up, okay, with 3 offers, 2 were identical, and guess which one got the house? The one that agreed with his sports choices. I'm not kidding you.
Like to
He
sports
says,
team.
he says, how do I decide? He said, it's tough, you know? We've asked everyone to write their best and final, and they wrote offers above full price. They met all the needs. They were really solid. They happened to like his sports choices. So that's, and that's what
Doesn't
got
that
it.
fall under fair housing?
By the way, during our buyer presentation, as we call our buyer strategy meeting, we have a place in our presentation that talks about them, that you are interviewing for a house as you walk through it today.
Yep.
So understand that whatever we say in that house, we want to further enhance what we're gonna do. So when we walked through the house that they were gonna buy, there were multiple offers on it, okay? It was in Rancho Mission Viejo. I told them before we went, they had the buyer presentation, just because they were kids and we weren't gonna get any of their commission. We still gave them the whole program. So we walked through the house and everything. They wanted this house. When we were in the backyard, I said, we're on camera, you know that. Let's go in the family room. Let's walk through it one more time. We'll stop in the family room and I want to talk to you. And he goes, great. So we walked all the way through in the family room, and I just sat and I said, do you guys like this house, right? He goes, yeah. And so I said, the sellers have done an amazing job with this house, okay? It's everything they've done is just what you guys like, right? I mean, it's a really great match. It looks like it's a happy home, and it's everything you like they've done. And I bet they're really nice people. So, however, we can write an offer of 1.4, it's listed at 1.399. You've made the decision that that's your last, best, and final, that's as far as you can go. And that is as far as you can go. So I suggest that let's get back and write an offer as quick as possible. Let's make the offer as clean as we can, okay? We'll give them every choice they want, but we're gonna have to let them know that this is our last, best, and final. And I'll tell the listing agent that, okay? We wrote that, multiple offers, one was 25,000 higher than ours. Yes, we got it, we got it. We presented our offer to the seller. Now, guess what? That seller now comes to many of the events that they have at their house with their 2 little girls that happen to play with our grandkids, and they're good friends, okay?
Too funny.
They're good friends. And we created that friend, and because if you think you're not interviewing for a house when you go through it, do it. Now, conversely, if you don't like the home, don't tell them to look at the camera and say your house stinks, because that doesn't serve any purpose. Be nice, but understand that you're being interviewed. Just like when they were walking through Corey and Cheese's house, he knew everything they said and when they were saying it, okay? So, okay, that was kind of, we got off trail
I
a
just
little
want
bit
to
there.
say, I don't think a lot of people understand how the lockbox works. And I do mention the fact that I have a running electronic record of everybody that
Yes.
opens
That
my
too.
box, for security.
That's
I
in
use
the
the word
presentation.
security, and they like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great
I-
point.
electronic.
And here's the other thing, what I would always tell my sellers is don't let anyone in the house, make them use the lockbox,
Yep.
so we have that recording and we can now get feedback,
Yeah.
okay? So, okay, next one, I'm not gonna do any repairs, the contract clearly states as is, okay? And it does, okay? So the response is, that is your choice, but then the buyers has an option to cancel if we deny their repair request. Perhaps we could find a compromise from the lengthy list the buyer submitted. Okay, is this a good answer?
Yep.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty good answer, but it will usually require a little bit more of a discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, and I always like to tell my sellers that once they put the house together, as far as the price, we're 1/3 of the way there. Okay, 1/3 of the way is the offer being accepted, 1/3 are the repairs and the inspection, and the third one is the appraisal. And that we may have to be flexible or negotiate on number 2 or number 3, especially number 2, repairs. Because most buyers, are going to want some repairs done. Now, there are times that you do no repairs, of course, in this market. But again, and I know offers are coming in, we'll take the house as is, and you state that. But in normal markets, and that's really what this is meant for, you need to kind of prepare the seller's expectations. If the listing of the seller's agent prepares the seller for reasonable things, and the buyer's agent prepares the buyers to be reasonable, you'll come together. It's when what they want to do is be a hero agent, that we're going to ask for everything, or we're going to say we're not going to fix anything, that those kind of collide and transactions fall apart. Most transactions don't fall apart for a repair request, as long as expectations are set, okay? Okay, the next one is just the opposite. I expect the sellers to make all the repairs listed on the inspection report. And then your expectations might be a bit unrealistic. I suggest we only ask for items that are safety items, code items, and significant malfunctions, okay? Good answer?
Yeah, it could be softened up.
It could be better.
Yeah. I like to always tell my buyers that there is no rules for what's gonna be done on repairs. And some sellers aren't gonna do anything. I just need to prepare you for that, no matter what we find. Then some sellers might take care of repairs, especially if they fall into these categories, which would be, again, the items that are safety items, code items, or significant malfunctions, not small things. That's kind of Ed's kind of rule is what I think should be fixed, but that doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily agreed upon by everybody else. So you have to come to that agreement. And the markets usually determine more. We're having far less repairs right now done than we might have in 5 years from now if the market changes drastically. I'm almost positive of that. The buyer's gonna be in control, and they say, there's a list, fix everything, and I might advise the seller, hey, listen, you wanna be in the market for another 144 days? Or 444 days? Let's fix everything. It's a small price to pay to get this done. Or give a credit. By the way, I love credits, especially when I represent a seller, because you're done and you don't have to do anything else. Now, from a buyer's perspective, I generally like credits, but you have to let the buyer be realistic that, to let them know what that might really take care of. A lot of times, they get a $5,000, credit for repairs. They think it's gonna do a lot, and it may not do that much these days. So, okay, next thing. Why do I need to disclose anything to the buyer? I thought homes were sold, caveat emptor. Caveat emptor. Anyone knows what that is? That's Latin for what?
Buyer beware.
Buyer beware. And were homes ever sold like this? Yeah, they were. So when did it change? Does anyone know?
Strasbourg.
Easton versus Strasbourg, 1984.
Oh yeah, I was just studying that.
Our whole transfer disclosure statement,
Yeah, this is good.
I lived it.
our whole transfer disclosure statement was put together because of Easton versus Strasbourg. Before that, it was buyer beware, and you didn't have to say anything. It's, if you can't find it, that's your problem. Which seems, looking back, crazy.
Wow.
But that's the way it was done my first 4 or 5 years in the real estate. However, it changed after Easton versus Strasbourg. And I remember, by the way, we didn't used to have inspectors. We do a walkthrough ourselves. We turn the faucet at the close of escrow and make sure the oven turned on, if we even did that. I had a little sheet I went through, but most people did nothing. Okay, it's amazing. And the early inspections were a joke. There were no real inspectors, so they went all the way from almost as lame as my walkthroughs were to, not much better. I mean, it was crazy. Now inspections are very thorough and very good generally. So again, what must we disclose to a buyer? We, meaning the agent, or our sellers? Anything
that can affect value or desirability.
Absolutely. It affects value or desirability. That's the exact language in Easton versus Strasbourg. That's why you see it on the very top of the transfer disclosure statement. It says they must disclose anything that affects value or desirability, and you know. It actually goes further than that. The law states that you can be held responsible for anything that you knew and didn't disclose that affects value and desirability, or what else?
Things that you
Should have known.
Things you should have known. Okay, so in other words, if you're just, you play the stupid card, then I'm just a seller stuck in stupid. That doesn't count. If you should have known, that's the standard they hold you to. Either you knew it and they can prove that, or if they can't prove that, but they prove that you should have known it, that's what takes place.
What are things
So,
that should have known, just out of curiosity, I guess, I've never run into that thing in this,
Yeah.
but what are things that you should know?
So it would be what should be known by a reasonable owner of the property. Let's say you live there, forever, and you didn't have hot water. Now, you think you'd be able to tell them that the hot water heater got, you should know you don't have hot water,
Or
right?
even say that you've lived there and like the water is coming out a lot slower than it
That's
used
the
to.
purpose of a third party inspection.
Yeah, and it's like,
Yeah.
Or
at
maybe-
some point you should probably think, we may have roots growing into the lines or something.
How about the fence? Like, who owns the fence or who put the fence up? You should
Yeah,
know
I mean,
something
things like that.
that.
So Yeah, I mean, you may not know who put the fence up, or who really paid for that, or maybe it's one line or the other line. You may not even know that, because you were the second, third, or fourth buyer of that home, and the first owner of that home could have told you, it was actually put a foot on their line, they paid for the whole fence. But you don't know, but if you should have known, then that's when they're gonna get it,
Could
yeah.
HOA fall into that? Should you know some things on the HOA? Cause a lot of people don't pay attention to that crap.
No, so HOA by law must disclose certain things. By the way, we're doing an HOA, training that's gonna be,
Webinar.
this should be a really good training if you guys wanna sign up for it at the board. It's like in 2 weeks from now, and it's gonna be everything about that you should know about an HOA if you sell a property in it. And it's gonna be, we're actually gonna be showing it in the hub, but you guys can sign on and watch that from home, it's free. I suggest you do that, because most of the homes that we represent in South Orange County have HOAs. And, we don't really know. Like one of the most things done wrong, I think, on the contract is there's two questions there. One is, the seller is gonna pay for all the documents required by the HOA, according to SB 1454, I think it is, something like that. So everyone check, that's not checked, it just is, right? Then the question below that is, who's gonna pay for additional documents requested by buyer? And a lot of times they pick seller. So you get a buyer who says, I want the financials and all the minutes for the last 15 years. And the HOA charges you $3,000 to do that. And you check seller, your seller pays for it, no matter what they want. They have an open checkbook for anything they want, right? And so you need to know.
Well, it's probably the buyer's agent that checked it and you didn't.
Yeah,
count it.
you didn't go back and counter it, so there you go. I tell our team, always check that as buyer, whether you represent buyer or seller. Because last thing you wanna do is have a buyer who does that, and then you get involved in a lawsuit even though the box was checked, okay? So if they want additional things, the law states the reasonable things they should have, okay? I have a list if anybody wants that, what the HOA must give them, and it's pretty good. I think they do a pretty good job of that law, so. Okay, so yeah, you need to disclose, and make sure they do disclose. Now, there's another kind of law of disclosure. If you disclose something to great detail, then you're expected to disclose everything to great detail. So don't just pick on one thing and talk about a roof repair that you did 12 years ago, but then a major repair you did a year ago you didn't talk about. Be consistent in your, be consistent. And by the way, for the most part, if something's been taken care of, you don't need to disclose it. The only time I usually suggest that we still may wanna disclose it is water intrusion. If you have water intrusions that's been taken care of, especially major, in the last couple of years, I would suggest that you disclose that. Or if you had pipes, all your pipes were changed like 3 years ago, I'd put that in there.
Yeah, I thought that was normal. Like anything that happened to the house, they're supposed to disclose.
No, it affects value or desirability. If it's been fixed, does it affect value or desirability?
Possibly. What if it comes
What
back?
if your old roof leaked, but you put a new roof on? You need to disclose that your old roof leaked? No, you fixed it. You got a new roof, okay? So normally you do not. I just go a little bit further and think on water intrusion, especially as a major repair, if it goes back, first of all, it's gonna show on a clue report, right? So they might ask for it that way, even if it's been taken care of. So, okay. The next question is kind of the flip to a buyer. As a buyer, is there anything I need to be concerned about? And I would, the response here, I would rely on our inspector to point out concerns. He might even suggest more inspections. Okay?
Decent.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, and I really like to rely on that inspector, and I like to be there at least at the end of every inspection so we can look at actionable items. And as the inspector goes through, then he can talk about things that might need more inspections. And you can ask, do you think we should, have a drainage inspection? Or do you think we should, put a camera down the sewer because we have that big tree and it looks like there might be some lines cut off there. So again, put it on your inspector. He has a higher degree of responsibility than we do by far because he's supposed to know more, and he does, he or she. So, any female inspectors out there?
Yes, I've had one recently. She's been great, Paula.
There's one that's going into
With
everybody's
pillars
open
and
houses
posts.
to trying to get business. I don't
And
Yeah.
she's smaller, so she can get in the attics, those big dudes.
I love it.
Well,
There you
It's
go.
about
lots of
time.
good stuff.
Yeah, no, I really like her, cause, Rick, you know, isn't doing it anymore.
Dan.
No, Rick from Pillars and Posts.
Oh, that's who I've been using now, yeah.
Yeah, so I got Paula.
Okay, we're almost done here. So, by the way, her slogan should be, I can go places other inspectors can. So,
Yeah.
there you go. So, again, everybody here should read the BIA. That's the attached sheet to, to our RPA. That shows you, that makes all kinds of disclosures to buyers of things they should check. Square footage and just everything on there. Read that BIA and you'll see the responsibility of the buyer to do their own due diligence. So, okay. Last question, and then we'll carry it over to when we pick this up in the fall. A good friend said I should sell FSBO. Is there any reason I should try it myself first? Okay.
Your friend is nuts.
Your friend is
That's a
nuts.
great
It's the worst
answer.
thing you can do. So, that's very true. I wouldn't say it that way. By the way, FSBOs today are like 2% of the market. FSBOs, when I came in the market, came in real estate in late '79, about a third of the market. All you had to do was get the buyer and seller to agree on price. The contract was only one page anyway. You take that one-page contract to escrow, and escrow then would do everything else. But then when our RPA came out in their originally 6-page version, they became joint escrow instructions. So now escrow couldn't just plug that in because it needed to originate from a realtor. Really pretty good planning on realtors, huh? So it's not done very much anymore. But one of the things I like to say is, first of all, you need to show your value to somebody that does that. They are nuts. You don't need to tell them they're nuts. You just need to kind of point out how they are nuts. Suggest to the seller that there are 2 major reasons that you need an agent. One is for the marketing, and the other is to be protected. Okay, to save you money, to make you money, and protect you. Okay, so you need that. Okay, and you obviously do. And again, you're selling your biggest asset, and you want to do without representation. It's risky. The other thing is there's something that came out a few years ago. And it said there are 164 things to do to close a transaction that all must be done. Transaction doesn't close without 164 things done. So my question, and you can ask this in kind of a tongue-in-cheek, kind of a fun way. So if you know all 164 things to do, then you could probably do it for sale by owner. By the way, do you know all 164 things? Because if you don't, then it's going to fall apart. It's like a recipe. You need all 164 ingredients to bake this cake, and if you don't have them all, it's not going to work. So honestly, and it's the old thing, if you think it's expensive to hire a professional, wait until you see how expensive it is when you don't hire a professional, right? So that's the kind of thing you do.
Exactly.
So, okay, I'm going to hit one more thing here because this is a good one. We want to find our dream home before we sell. Okay, so you talk about response. That is an option if you have enough money for a down payment and can qualify for a loan without having to sell your home. Okay. One of the things I find out that agents do when they go to listings is all too many times they're focused on getting a listing and the home on the market, and they don't pay enough attention on the seller's very specific needs. Okay, so in other words, this isn't just selling a house. This might be selling a house, buying a house, there's timing involved, there might be other people involved. There's a lot of things involved. And so you always want to get to the bottom of this, kind of the genesis of what are you trying to accomplish here? Are you trying to sell and buy? And you may need to talk about all the advantages. Now, I put a sheet together. If anybody wants this, give me your card and I'll email it to you. And basically what it does is these are buy-sell scenarios. You can buy a home before you sell a home. You can sell a home and then go buy a home. There's options to do both. And these are the different ways that you can do them. And these are the positives and the negatives. So let's say, for instance, in this market, you get somebody very fearful about buying a home very fearful about selling before they buy. I can understand that concern right now more than ever, right? Because all of a sudden they sell their house and now they get in line trying to make all these multiple offers. Who knows if they can ever find a house? So if that's the case, then they have a couple options today, right? They they can go out and buy, maybe get a swing loan. There's some ways you can do that. They might be able to buy, and they can make it, they can go out and buy and then make their home, sell it, but make it subject to successful purchase of another home. Now it's gonna water down, getting their home sold, but do you think any buyers would buy a home today subject to the buyer finding a suitable replacement home? Of course, in this market, they might take that gamble. I don't always think that's the best way to go, and generally it's not, but you might get away with it. The main thing is you have to find a comfort zone for your seller to find out where they're at. This can be scary, and if we focus on just going there and getting a listing and trying to get that home on the market and not taking care of all of their needs, okay, buying, selling, and every question they have, then we're kind of getting the cart before the horse, probably in their mind, and we really are, okay? So, questions on that? I mean, I think, you kind of get a feel for that, but I've probably gone in before and just kind of got right to the fact that we're gonna, get right into our marketing plan of what we do, and here's the price, and here's what we do. But just sit down. The first couple questions should be okay, so what are you trying to accomplish here? You're thinking of selling. Are you buying something else in the near future, in the distant future, or where are you going from here? Ask that question. If you don't ask that questions, then I think you're missing it. Again, I think, there's certain questions you should always ask a seller. That's one. Okay, what's another question you should always ask a seller? People on my team, you know this.
What are you looking for?
What are you looking for in a real estate agent? Okay, because guess what? They'll tell you. Now and then when you do your presentation, if you ask that early on, everything you say in your presentation will make sure that you cover all of their needs that they feel are important. Different people feel different importance. You might have a seller that had a bad experience and they got no communication whatsoever from their past agent. The number one important thing to them is communication. So we focus on that. I mean, you're gonna be good at that anyway, but you might hit on that more than once. So.
I have a quick question.
Okay.
On disclosures, or if, the seller doesn't do it, what's the length of time that Mrs. Kravitz, the neighbor, can tell them something? And then they can possibly but how many years can they sue those sellers if they find something out?
Oh, you mean for discovery?
Yeah.
Well, most things go 3 years, but there's 2 laws to that. And I'm not an attorney, so I'm not trying to give you legal advice. I'm just gonna say something, and you should have this. Call your attorney for the real answer, okay? But you have 3 years, or in some cases, 3 years from discovery, okay? So generally, for claims that the buyer's gonna have against the seller, it's 3 years. But sometimes, if something was hidden, it can be 3 years from discovery by the buyer. So,
Okay.
and that's an attorney question, what falls into which category. Don't really know. No. Fortunately, in the years we're in business, we've not sued one time, so we dodged all those bullets. So, okay, hey guys, we'll pick this up in the fall, and one of the things we're going to have in the next questions, we have about 10 more questions, but I want to have a little workshop on how to get a fair commission for yourself. Okay,
cool. And
I can tell you it's not hard. You just have to set your mind and know where to go with the discussion, and we're going to role play that too. I'm gonna have you guys kind of give me the most difficult situations you can, and I'll handle them. Okay, hey, thanks guys.
Thank you.